This is the Stick in the Mud podcast, episode 7. Today, we'll be talking about starting your own mud. Hey guys and gals, welcome to the Stick in the Mud podcast. I'm your host, Tark. If this is your first time listening, I'd like to say thanks for tuning in. Repeat listeners, thank you too. The Stick in the Mud podcast is released once a week on Wednesdays, except for this week because, well, I had some tech issues and so this show's getting out much later than it should have. Notes for the show can be found at www.stickinthemudpodcast.com. You can find us on iTunes and Google Play Music as Stick in the Mud Podcast. If you want to leave a review on either, that'd be great. You can also follow us on Twitter at Mud Podcast, where occasionally I'll tweet things. I'm not too good at Twitter yet. All the links are going to be in the show notes. So let's go ahead and talk about starting up your own mud. So first off, why would you want to start your own mud? A lot of people consider it to be a dying genre, and with the fragmentation that exists in the number of people that would play a mud in the first place, it would seem like throwing another game out there just wouldn't have a whole lot of a point. A lot of people instead would recommend joining the staff of an existing mud, or at least getting involved in helping out with the day-to-day running of a mud, helping retain new players, making the game exciting, running plots, that sort of thing. Well, the best reason I can think of for starting your own mud is because it does allow you to be creative. Whether you're a world builder, a coder, or a combination of the two, there's a lot of cool things that haven't been explored in MUDs yet that really, well, I think do have a possibility of taking off fairly well. For instance, I had joked a couple episodes back about my ideal MUD would be a Weird West, Cthulhu crossover sort of thing. Think Dark Tower meets H.P. Lovecraft. You've got a pretty good idea of what I'd be going for if I started my own game. I would also make my game probably primarily PvE focused, but with a robust PvP system as well. Think kind of like, I guess, the Iron Realm games, but more looking at trying to implement some of the things that World of Warcraft does with some of their endgame and, the not so endgame content. Other genres out there in the MUD universe aren't very well represented either. I can think of, Star Wars games, maybe a Star Trek game, and that's really it for sci-fi. You don't really see too many original sci-fi settings out there right now. The vast majority of games do tend to be fantasy-based, which to me is kind of doing a disservice to the MUD community in general. So enough of me blathering on about why you should start your own game or why you shouldn't. Let's talk about how you'd actually go about doing that. First off, you're going to need somewhere to host your game. Now, you could run your own server in your house, have it use your local internet connection, and in the days of high-speed internet, that might be enough for a game that's not too busy without a whole bunch of players. Other options could include looking at a cloud-based server, something like AWS or Microsoft's Azure service, or, and this would probably be one of the easiest ways to do it, get in touch with Opie over at funcity.org. He loves giving MUDs server space on his equipment. Far as I know, he'll do it for free. Now, I know he's also considering setting up a paid service, give you generally more space, a bit more resources, but for a starting up game, odds are you're probably not going to need that. Of course, if you do want to pay just to help defray some of the costs, well, I'm sure he wouldn't say no. So, you've got your server. Next up, you need a code base. Now, you can either sit down and write your own from scratch, pick a language. Personally, it's not the way I would go. Instead, I would probably look at going with an already existing code base. Now, which code base should you choose? Well, that's entirely up to you and what languages you're comfortable in. The majority of the MUD code bases, just looking around on the net, seem to come from the 80s and 90s, but mostly, you're probably looking at the 90s, and it's going to be written in C. So, if you're really comfortable with C, definitely the way to go. Some are better than others. Some have a lot more support, pre-built modules out there that you could add on. Deku, ROM, Merc, and Circle would all be good ones to start off with. If you're not interested in having a super combat, PvE style, or PvP style MUD, You might want to look at the Moo code bases. Penmush, Tinymush, Moo. All of those out there are more suited for, I guess you could call it a role-playing only environment. There are exceptions to this, of course, but in general, that's what you'd be looking for if you want to focus more on the story and less on mechanics. Now, another set of options would be the two engines that I know of that are written in more modern code. The first one is Evenia, located at www.evenia, that's, kind of how I would spell it out, .com. Evenia is written in Python, and the idea behind it is to give you the basic framework that you need to build a MUD. So things like handling all the telnet stuff, player objects, building, and all that are included right out of the box. There's also some sample stuff, basic combat system, an overworld map, things like that you can download and add to it. And then it does come with a web client and a web server out of the box. So as far as setup goes, it's pretty easy to get going. Now, the downside of the Venia, I would say it's still kind of in beta. I believe they're on their 0.7 release. So it does still have a way to go before everything's all ironed out and set. But again, if you want to learn Python, or if you're already pretty good with Python, it's a great way to start. The other more modern option would be Ranvier. They're located over at ranviermud.com. That's RANVIER mud. And their code is based on Node.js. So what you'll end up doing is having your MUD run using JavaScript. So what's neat about this one is that it also does include its own web client, as well as having a GUI-based builder named Soma. And that allows you to build your areas using a graphical user interface, as opposed to sitting down and typing in descriptions into the MUD itself. Documentation is pretty good from what I've read so far. And the way they work their stuff is using a bundle system where you don't really change the core functionality of the MUD, but instead you just have a bundle that imports in. It allows people to easily share commands, areas, behaviors, NPCs, all sorts of neat stuff. The really cool thing to me is that it does include an optional coordinate-based room system, which I think is really cool, just because, especially if you're looking to do like ranged combat or something like that, well, using coordinates as opposed to north, south, east, west, and room numbers makes it a lot easier to get those mechanics in place, I'd think. The real big thing that they like is that it's in JavaScript. You don't have to compile, you don't have to learn C, you don't have to mess around with Cygwin, and there's no 15-year-old spaghetti code to go through. Ranvier out of the box includes taking care of connecting, classes, leveling, combat, quest system, quite a bit of just neat things that most games are probably going to implement anyways. And of course, you can either keep those enabled or disable them. It's completely up to you. So once you've got the game up and running, well, now it's time to start making it your own. Either you need to sit down and come up with your world, your story, what's going on, or alternatively, if you're more the coder type, you can team up with a builder, people that like to write, and have them take care of crafting the world for you, and you end up implementing what they want to have happen. Obviously, if you're more of a builder type, well, the exact opposite would apply. You create the world, find a coder, have them implement your wildest dreams and fantasies. Now, generally, it's a lot easier for a coder to find a builder because, well, most of the people out in the MUD universe have this one great idea for an awesome game, but they're usually too lazy to learn how to code. Not, to put them down, but, well, that's the truth of the matter. The big thing in my book is whatever code base you use, take it and make it your own. Something other than the generic elves, dwarves, orcs fantasy setting would be great to see out there. I can guarantee you, if you've got an interesting draw, I'll be there I'll be able to give you some pointers, ideas where you can improve, and heck, even include it on the podcast and give you a review. So, if it were me starting up a game, I'd take a look at what isn't out there and expanding from it if you're interested. So, that's going to go ahead and do it for this episode of the Stick in the Mud podcast. I'd like to thank Opie over at funcity.org for taking care of the hosting and, well, really the back end stuff of the website and the mud, or wow, the website and the podcast. I'd like to thank Sean Phillips for giving me that rockin' intro music, and my lovely wife for the artwork that she's made so far and that she plans to continue making for me, well, once she finds time. So, with that all being said, thanks for listening, and have fun out there making the mud of your dreams.